Welcome to this poetry comparison webinar for unseen poetry comparison. Now we have three takeaways or three key learning aims. First of all, to understand the poem To a Daughter Leaving Home. Secondly, to understand the poem For My Sister, and then to compare the poems. And this is designed for a specific assignment. Compare the presentation of family relationships in To a Daughter Leaving Home and Poem For My Sister. Now let's look at the first poem. This is To a Daughter Leaving Home by Linda Paston. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping alongside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park, I kept waiting for the thud of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief waving goodbye. Now, when we look at poetry, we need to think about a few different aspects. I help students to remember it using what, how, and why, or SMILE. So what is the poem about? What is the focus of the poem at the beginning and the middle and the end? So that's about the structure and the meaning. How are poetic techniques used? How are language features used? So it's how the methods that are used and the effect of the methods, that's imagery and language. And then why has it been written? What's the background? What's the purpose? What's the intention of the poet? And that's the effect. So every time you see poetry, SMILE. It's just one way of understanding the things to look at when you're analysing poetry: structure and meaning, imagery and language, and effect. What, how, and why. So thinking about To My Daughter, To a Daughter Leaving Home. Now, this is written in the first person. It's a parent's perspective and has a very anecdotal tone. Although it's written by Linda Paston, it could be a persona, it could be a voice that she's using rather than her own self. So we can't say that it's a mother, but we can say that it's a parent. We also know that the poem is retrospective. It thinks back about the time where her daughter or his daughter was 8. So the whole poem is told in flashback. When I taught you, it's thinking back to the past and comparing that important, significant event of teaching a child to ride a bike at the age of 8 to this current time where the daughters are in fact leaving home, perhaps in the late teens or perhaps even later. There is a great use of enjambment through the poem, and we can see that there is an incredible pace. It's almost that inevitability of gaining speed, my own mouth rounding in surprise, and that use of assonance, mouth rounding, you can hear the chiming of the vowels, again gives that sense that it's something it's got a sense of momentum and speed. And the lines are irregular, some of them are longer and shorter, and perhaps it's showing that unpredictability of the character of the daughter, but also that the relationship is becoming unstable. First they're close, and then they're distant. First then they're close, and then they're distant. You've got the family relationship changing because of the bike and the daughter learning how to ride it and gaining independence. This is non-stanzaic. That means it's in one big block. It's only 20-something lines, and it's very brief, but very powerful, because this is a momentous occasion when there's a huge shift in the family relationship. And you can see that the caesura, smaller, more breakable. That pause in the line shows that sense of vulnerability, more breakable, and helplessness, that the parent is feeling that the child is going away from them. They can't grab them as easily as they used to be able to. So in this poem, the writer uses a great many different techniques and different devices and methods and poetic language. So for example, prepositions are used, and you can see the shift: along, beside, and ahead. This is inferring the shifting relationship where the daughter was dependent and the mother or the father was along and beside, and then the daughter is independent, and that preposition shows that she's going kind of jet setting ahead. The parent is finding it hard to catch up. We have plosive alliteration. So the plosive is p, d, t. There's p stops in the mouth of the breath. The plosive alliteration, path in the park, shows that this is a significant turning point for the family relationships. And then the contrasting verbs, where the child wobbled at the start and then she's pumping with a repetition there, suggests that sense of confidence as she masters learning how to ride the bike. And then the thud and the crash is when the parent is anticipating disaster and fearing the worst, but it doesn't happen. So the sense of relief and pride, but it's also mixed with loss as the child becomes smaller and difficult to catch up with. And those participles, waiting of the mother and the pumping, contrast the nervousness and the confidence of the child and the parent. And then the oxymoron, screaming with laughter. So the screaming suggests pain or terror, and then laughter is that joy and surprise. So it's that combination of emotions as she's growing up and becoming more distant physically and emotionally from that parental-child relationship. Then there's a final simile, like a handkerchief waving goodbye. You can see how short the lines are. So those slashes are showing that this is a new line. Like a handkerchief waving goodbye. 2 words on each line until you get the final 1-word line. There's that sense of finality, that sense of separation. And it ends with a tone of regret that the parent can't keep up and the child has forged her own destiny on the bike and in life generally. So overall, this poem explores a parent's fear, surprise, pride, and sadness as the daughter gains independence. And the idea of riding a bicycle is an extended metaphor that helps us to understand those feelings as the family relationship changes. What about the second poem? Let's look at Poem for My Sister. This is by Liz Lockhead. My sister likes to try my shoes, to strut in them and admire her spindle-thin 12-year-old legs in this season's styles. She says they fit her perfectly, but wobbles on their high heels. They're hard to balance. I like to watch my little sister playing hopscotch, admire the quick, neat hops and skips of her quick peck, never missing their mark, not overstepping the line. She's competent at Peaver. I try to warn my little sister about unsuitable shoes, point out my own distorted feet, the calluses, odd patches of hard skin. I should not like to see her in my shoes. I wish she could stay sure-footed, sensibly shod. Now, again, obviously, this is very much about family relationships, and we're thinking in terms of smile, what, how, why, in order to help us shape our response. Like the other poem, this is in first person. It's talking directly to the sister, however. The other poem was talking about the daughter, and this is talking directly to the sister, giving this advice in an advisory tone. There's a sense that this is someone who's wiser and giving information to help and support. Now, like to a daughter leaving home, there is also a flashback. There's a sense that this is retrospective, but the whole poem is actually written in present tense. I like to watch my sister playing hopscotch. This is continuous presence. So it seems as if there's this ongoing tension between the older sister and the 12-year-old sister, because it's written in this present tense, and their relationship dynamic is all about one advising and the other ignoring. Also, like the other poem, engagement is used. We can see in stanza 1, it's that sense of uncertainty, wobbles on their high heels. But in stanza 2, when she's talking about hopscotch, never missing a mark, not overstepping the line, there's a sense of competence. And it seems that the sister wants her younger sister to stick to that arena of childhood where she is confident and in control. Unlike mother to daughter leaving home, this poem is stanzaic. That means it has stanzas or paragraphs 3 stanzas. Stanzas 1 and 3 are 8 lines long, and perhaps they show regularity, predictability, safety. Stanza 2 is encased or cocooned in the middle, and it shifts to a playground. And again, that may well show the comfort of childhood because it's in the middle of both of those stanzas. Like the other poem, caesura is used. It says, my own distorted feet, the calluses. This reveals a sense of regret from the older sister. She's obviously made some bad choices. She doesn't want to see the sister in her own shoes. She doesn't want the sister to experience the hardness of the skin and the distortion. She's gone the wrong way and she's had to pay for it. She's suffered because she's taken the wrong steps in life. So this poem uses possessive pronouns, my shoes. There's a shifting in the relationship balance. The child, the 12-year-old, wants to jump into adolescence, wants to jump into adulthood, but the sister's saying, these are my shoes. They're not ready. You're not ready for high heels. Stay a child. There's a compound adjective, spindle thin. So although the 12-year-old is looking at her own legs, spindle thin legs, with the high heels on and admiring them, there's still a sense of vulnerability and weakness. So the glamour, admiring her own legs, seems to be short-lived because the spindle thin is really emphasizing the fact that she's not ready for the high heels. Like the other poem, alliteration is used. The first poem uses plosive alliteration. This uses sibilant alliteration, sure-footed and sensibly shod, which shows that the sister, the older sister, wants the younger sister to take time, to not rush into adulthood, but not rush into making poor decisions, to stay sensible and make good decisions and follow a good path in life. Like the other poem, there are contrasting verbs. So you've got that sense of her strutting or trying to strut, but she wobbles. And you've got that sense that the sister is admiring her, but warning her. It's the inappropriateness of the footwear. She admires her sister on the hopscotch field, if you like, but not. She warns her in inappropriate footwear. And the sister wobbling when she tries to strut is the symbol that independence is trying to be acquired too early. And then onomatopoeia, hops and skips, is showing that instead of being self-possessed and self-obsessed, strutting, admiring herself in stanza 1, she's carefree and she's a real child, embracing the arena of childhood. Why has the poem been written? It seems as if the poem explores the sister's pride and concern. So like the first poem, there's a mix of feelings in this family relationships. The first one, she was full of pride for her, or he was full of pride for the daughter, and yet there was that sense of fear and concern and separation. And similarly, there is a sense of concern and warning as the sister attempts to enter adolescence too quickly. So overall, To a Daughter has no stanzas to show the speed and the skill of the daughter mastering balance. The central metaphor is about learning a bike, and she's zooming away into adulthood. And overall, the effect is that the poet wants us to understand that the daughter's independence makes the parent feel redundant and separate and distant. In contrast, Poem for My Sister is stanzaic, has 3 stanzas, and you have a central stanza where you have the hopscotch, the jumping, the skipping, the accuracy that would be impossible in high heels. The central metaphor is of high heels, that female image of adulthood, and this idea that she's trying to be too glamorous too early. And the overall idea is that young children should not imitate adults. They shouldn't be precociously trying to inappropriately develop too early. Right, so let's talk about how we actually devise and write a comparative paragraph. The first thing we look at is about the point of connection. So it's a hanger method. We write about what both of them are doing. Then we look at the first poem and introduce evidence for the first poem before a comparative connective, similarly or in contrast. Then we introduce evidence for the second poem and then try and pull it all together. So you can see the burger bun looks very unhealthy, although it might be a veggie burger. So where you have bread at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, you try and use comparative connectives to hold it all together to show that you're comparing two different items, two different poems. So both of the poems do this. Poem 1 does this, give the evidence. Similarly, or in contrast, poem 2 does this, give the evidence, and then we draw it back together. So this kind of burger format to pull the comparative paragraph together. So let me show you an example for this particular assignment. Both poems use an extended metaphor of physical activity and play to represent relationships between family members who are concerned about the speed of change. So you've got the both at the beginning. It's the point of connection for each poem. It's about the family members. The relationship is one of concern because they are changing so quickly. We can see that in the daughter leaving home, that sense of speed and change, and we can see that in the other poem, that speed of change in appropriate footwear. So you've got that comparison at the beginning of the paragraph. To a Daughter uses a retrospective narrative about learning to ride a bike to show the surprise of a parent when their child gains independence, and instead of looking back, simply waves the adult goodbye. So you can see all of the embedded quotations that I've used: bicycle, surprise, waves, goodbye, to put that evidence there for the comparison. Similarly, Poem for My Sister examines the apprehension of the older sister who warns her sibling about growing up too quickly. The 12-year-old seems deluded and overconfident as she struts in unsuitable heels, while the speaker exposes the harsh realities of calluses when wrong decisions are made in life. So you can see again those embedded quotations introducing evidence to support the idea that there's an apprehension, there's a concern, there's a worry. The family relationship is strained because of worry from the family members. Like To a Daughter, family relationships are strained in Poem for My Sister because of a young person's decisions. The daughter seeks separation and the sister attempts imitation, and both result in distancing, as the parent is literally and metaphorically left behind, and the older sister gives unwelcome advice that may be ignored. So you've got the comparison at the end. You can see that one is about separation, the other is about imitation, but both result in distancing. One is literally left behind, metaphorically left behind, and the other one is just leaving behind the advice. So you can see that the comparisons are quite specific, they're quite close, and because it's clear and developed and well supported and detailed and explained and developed, then hopefully this will strike level 4 or level 5, which is a grade 5 or a grade 6, because it's specific, it's clear, and the connections are really well sought. So, are you ready to write this assignment? Compare the presentation of family relationships in To a Daughter Leaving Home and Poem for My Sister. If you are ready to complete this assignment, I hope that you will remember to smile when you see poetry. You will compare what first. You'll compare what the poems are about, what is at the beginning, what is at the middle, what is at the end. You'll look at the structure. You'll think about the perspective. So what narrative perspective is there, and what is the poem saying about family relationships? Then you'll look at the how. You'll compare the poetic techniques, you'll compare the language features, you'll write about the similarities and the differences, and then the why. Why has it been written? What's the overall effect and purpose for each poem? And then I hope that you'll be able to shape your paragraph with both the poems do this. Write about the first poem with evidence. Similarly, write about the next poem with evidence, and then pull comparison back with a final comparative summative comment at the end. I hope that that's really helped you to write comparatively about these two poems. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time.